In 47 years, the Pine and Oak restaurant had never closed on Christmas Eve. The brick building on Boston's East Side had survived 3 recessions, 2 ownership changes, and the slow death of the neighborhood around it before gentrification breathed money back into streets that had once smelled like rust and old coffee. Tonight, the dining room glowed with the kind of warmth people paid good money to feel, even if just for an evening. Garlands of fresh pine draped across exposed beams, their scent mixing with roasted duck and butter-heavy sauces that cost more than some families spent on groceries in a week. Red candles flickered on every table, their light catching in crystal glasses half filled with wine that bore French names most diners couldn't pronounce. In the corner, an elderly pianist worked through Silent Night with the reverence of a man who understood that some songs deserved more than background noise. His fingers moved across keys worn smooth by 2 decades of holiday shifts, and even the servers carrying trays of food worth triple their hourly wage paused mid-step when the chorus swelled. The dining room was full. Families crowded around tables that seated 8, children in velvet dresses and tiny bow ties squirming in chairs while grandparents raised glasses and toasts that always ended with someone crying, happy tears. Laughter rolled through the room in waves, breaking against the brick walls and coming back softer. The sound of silverware on porcelain created a rhythm that spoke of abundance, of togetherness, of everything the season promised to those lucky enough to have people who showed up. Conversations overlapped, fathers telling stories they told every year because tradition mattered more than novelty, mothers wiping chocolate from small faces, teenagers pretending to be bored while secretly grateful for this one night when everything felt right. Marcus Reed moved through this world like a shadow. At 36, he wore the standard uniform of black slacks from a discount store where he checked the clearance rack every paycheck and a white shirt he pressed himself every Sunday evening using an iron that had belonged to his late mother. The shirt had belonged to his father once, passed down after the old man died 3 years ago from lung cancer that ate through him faster than the chemotherapy could fight. Marcus had taken the shirt from the hospital room, washed it twice to get the smell of antiseptic out, and wore it to work every shift since. The collar was starting to fray, but he kept it clean, kept it pressed, kept it white enough that customers never looked twice. His hands were rough, calloused across the palms with small scars from 100 minor repairs. The kind of hands that knew work intimately and had made peace with it years ago. He had worked at Pine and Oak for 5 years now, first as a server when he desperately needed any job that would let him support his son, then adding maintenance work when Gloria Brennan discovered he could fix a broken espresso machine with nothing but a screwdriver, and patience inherited from a father who had worked as a mechanic, before arthritis claimed his hands and then cancer claimed everything else. 5 years, the same 5 years since Sarah left. Marcus carried a tray of empty glasses toward the kitchen, his mind doing the math it always did this time of month. Rent due in 6 days, $347 in savings after December's bills. Tyler's inhaler needed refilling, but insurance wouldn't cover the next one until January 3rd. The math never worked out clean, never came up positive, but he kept running the numbers anyway because the alternative was not thinking about money at all, and that way led to eviction notices and calls from collection agencies whose voices always sounded the same, bored and relentless. The kitchen was chaos, all stainless steel and shouting in English and Spanish. Marcus dropped the tray at the dishwashing station where Miguel worked through mountains of plates with efficiency born from doing the same job for 12 years. They nodded at each other, the wordless acknowledgement of men who understood that some nights you just put your head down and pushed through until closing. Marcus checked the time. 6:15. His break came at 6:30, the same 15 minutes Gloria Brennan carved out for him every Christmas Eve, because she was a tired woman of 52 with 3 teenagers of her own and eyes that had seen too many single parents drown trying to keep their heads above water. She had looked at Marcus 5 years ago during his first holiday shift, seen the desperate hope mixed with resignation, the way he kept glancing toward the small alcove near the kitchen where employees took their breaks, and simply said yes before he even finished asking. The alcove was tucked between the bright dining room and the fluorescent chaos of the dish pit, a forgotten space with 2 folding chairs and a small plastic table someone had probably stolen from a yard sale decades ago. Tyler sat there now on one of those chairs, feet dangling 6 inches from the floor in shoes Marcus had bought one size too big so they would last through spring. The boy wore a paper Santa hat he had made himself at school, construction paper carefully folded and stapled, the cotton ball at the tip slightly lopsided, but attached with enough glue to survive the walk from school to the restaurant in his backpack. Tyler was 7 years old and had his father's hazel eyes, the same eyes that had belonged to Marcus's mother before the diabetes took her vision and then her life. He held a small notebook with a blue cover, pages filled with drawings of snowmen and stars and houses with smoke curling from chimneys. Houses Tyler had seen on television but never lived in. Their apartment in Dorchester had radiator heat that clanked like someone was hitting the pipes with a wrench, and the landlord had painted over the windows so many times they barely opened anymore. The boy looked up when Marcus appeared, his face lighting up in a way that made Marcus's chest hurt because he knew he didn't deserve that look, knew he hadn't earned the kind of love that came without conditions. Tyler's voice came out soft, practiced at not disturbing the adult world around him. His hands were still on the notebook. "Dad, do you think Mom will call tonight?" Marcus's hands tightened on the tray he was still holding. He set it down on the plastic table with more care than necessary, buying himself 3 seconds to find words that wouldn't be lies, but also wouldn't break his son's heart all over again. "I don't know, buddy." The boy nodded, accepting this the way he accepted everything else, with a maturity that no 7-year-old should have to carry. "Okay." He went back to his drawing, adding careful lines to what looked like a Christmas tree, each branch perfectly spaced. Marcus wanted to tell him that Sarah wasn't going to call, that she hadn't called in 4 years, that she had moved to San Diego with a new husband and 2 new children, and a life that had no room for the son she had walked away from when he was 2 years old. But Tyler already knew this. The boy was smart enough to read the silence between phone calls that never came, smart enough to understand what it meant when other kids at school talked about visiting their mothers, and he changed the subject. So Marcus just put a hand on his son's shoulder and squeezed once, then headed back to the dining room because his break hadn't started yet, and Gloria Brennan was kind, but she wasn't a saint. The pianist had moved on to "O Holy Night," the notes climbing and falling in waves that made people stop talking mid-sentence. Marcus refilled water glasses at table 9, where an elderly couple sat holding hands across the tablecloth, their wedding rings worn smooth by decades of wear. The woman smiled at him, and he smiled back, the practiced expression that servers learned in their first week, warm enough to seem genuine but not so warm that customers thought you wanted to chat. At table 4, a family of 8 sang "Happy Birthday" to a little girl standing on her chair to blow out 5 pink candles on a chocolate cake. Her face scrunched in concentration as she made her wish, lips moving soundlessly, and when she blew out the candles, everyone clapped. The mother caught Marcus's eye, and he nodded, already moving to clear the appetizer plates so the main course could come out hot. The contrast was sharp enough to cut. 1 dining room, 2 worlds that never touched. Tables full of noise and light and belonging, where people laughed too loud and stole bites from each other's plates, because that was what family meant. And then the alcove where his son sat with a paper hat and a notebook full of houses they would never afford, waiting patiently for 15 minutes of his father's attention. Marcus had learned to live with this contrast. He had learned a lot of things in 5 years. How to press a shirt so it looked professional even after 40 washes. How to smile when customers complained about food that cost more than his daily wage. How to fix a commercial refrigerator with parts scavenged from YouTube tutorials and the kind of determination that came from knowing if you called a repair company, they would charge $400 you didn't have. How to be grateful for a job that let him see his son on Christmas Eve, even if it meant Tyler sat in an alcove eating a cupcake instead of being home with presents and a tree and all the things other kids took for granted. 6:25. 5 minutes until his break. Marcus delivered entrees to table 12, a family of 3 generations who were deep in a story about Thanksgiving, 1988, when Uncle Robert showed up to his own wedding in fishing waders because he lost track of time at the lake. The grandfather was laughing so hard he had to wipe his eyes, and the teenagers at the table were rolling theirs but smiling anyway, because this was the good kind of annoying, the kind that meant you had people who cared enough to tell the same stories over and over. Marcus cleared their appetizer plates and headed back to the kitchen. Gloria Brennan stood by the expo station, her gray hair pulled back in a bun that had started to come loose an hour ago. She looked at him and jerked her head toward the alcove. Go! 15 minutes. Don't let anyone see the kid or corporate will have my ass. He nodded his thanks. Gloria turned back to the kitchen, already yelling at someone about a steak that had come back overcooked. She had been managing this restaurant for 16 years, had worked her way up from hostess, and she ran the place with the kind of efficient authority that came from understanding that restaurants were controlled chaos at best and complete disaster at worst. She had 3 kids at home, a husband who drove trucks and was gone more than he was around, and a mortgage on a house in Quincy that was worth less now than when they bought it in 2006. She understood what it meant to work every holiday so your kids could have presents. She understood what it meant to smile through customer complaints while doing math in your head to figure out if you could afford the car repair that was already 2 weeks overdue. She had seen Marcus 5 years ago, fresh from the wreckage of his marriage, with a 2-year-old kid who wheezed when he breathed and medical bills that would have crushed most people. She had given him a job when he had no experience serving, had taught him how to carry 3 plates at once and how to read a table's mood, and she had looked the other way every Christmas Eve when he asked to bring his son. Some things mattered more than policy. Marcus walked to the alcove. Tyler had finished his drawing and was now working on his homework, simple multiplication problems that he was solving with a pencil stub. The boy looked up and smiled, that same unconditional joy that made Marcus feel like he had won a lottery he didn't deserve. From his jacket pocket, Marcus pulled out a white bakery box. He had stopped at the discount store on his way to work, the one on Mass Ave where they marked down day-old items at 5 in the evening. Inside was a cupcake from the clearance rack, chocolate with vanilla frosting that had gotten smeared during transport, reduced from $3 to $1.75 because the swirl was crooked. Marcus had tried to fix it with the back of a plastic spoon in the employee bathroom, smoothing the frosting into something that looked almost intentional. He set the box on the plastic table like it was something precious, like it was a layered cake from the French bakery downtown where a single slice cost more than Marcus made in an hour. Tyler's eyes went wide. Is that for me? For us. Marcus pulled the cupcake from the box. Merry Christmas, buddy. From his other pocket, he produced a single birthday candle, white and thin, the kind that came in packages of 50 for $2 at the grocery store. He bought 1 package a year and rationed them for small celebrations. Tyler's actual birthday in March, Christmas, and sometimes on Fridays when the week had been particularly brutal, and they both needed a reminder that small joys still existed in a world that often felt designed to crush them. Marcus struck a match from a book he had taken from the bar, the kind with the restaurant's logo printed on the front. The match hissed to life, sulfur sharp, and he cupped his hand around the flame to shield it from the draft that came every time the kitchen door swung open. He touched the match to the wick. The candle caught, burning steady and bright, a single point of light in the dim alcove that smelled like industrial soap and fryer oil, and underneath it all, the faint scent of cinnamon from someone's abandoned hot chocolate. Tyler began to hum Jingle Bells under his breath, so soft it might have been mistaken for the building settling or the hum of the industrial refrigerator in the back. Marcus hummed along, his voice slightly off-key but earnest, and for 3 minutes they existed in a bubble of their own making. A private world where poverty didn't matter because they had each other, where a $1.75 cupcake tasted like a feast because it was shared with love. Tyler's voice broke through the humming, barely audible, fragile as spun glass. "Dad, I'm sorry we can't go home and have a big dinner like other families." Marcus reached across the small plastic table and took his son's hand. The boy's fingers were cold despite the warmth of the restaurant, always cold because he was too small to generate enough body heat, because the winter coat Marcus had bought him from the thrift store was good but not great, serviceable but not perfect. Marcus's throat tightened with the familiar ache of wanting to give his son the world and having only a cupcake to offer. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Tyler, listen to me. You are my family. Sitting here with you is the best Christmas I could ask for." The boy's eyes dropped to the table, to the candle flame dancing in the draft. "But I didn't get you anything. All the other kids at school were talking about the presents they bought their parents. Timothy got his mom a necklace. Sarah made her dad a picture frame. I didn't have money for anything." Marcus squeezed his son's hand gently, carefully, like he was holding something that might break. "You're here. That's everything." Tyler looked up, doubt written across his face in the way only children could show it, naked and unashamed. His voice carried the weight of something he had been holding for a while. "But you work so hard. You deserve something nice." The words hit Marcus harder than any complaint from a customer, harder than any bill he couldn't pay, harder than any night he had lain awake doing math that never added up to enough. He knelt down so he was eye level with his son, their faces inches apart in the dim alcove. "You know what the best present is? Having someone who wants to spend time with you. Everything else is just stuff. You are the gift, Tyler. You always have been." The boy's expression shifted, something old and young at the same time, wisdom born from watching his father work multiple jobs to keep them fed, mixed with the innocence of a child who still believed that goodness would be rewarded. "Really? Really?" Marcus pulled his son into a hug, feeling the small body press against his chest, feeling the paper Santa hat crumple between them. Tyler wrapped his arms around his father's neck and held on like he was afraid of letting go, and Marcus closed his eyes and pretended for just a moment that this alcove was a house with a chimney, that the cupcake was a feast, that they had more than just each other. When this pulled apart, Tyler smiled, small and certain, the kind of smile that came from a deep well of trust. He leaned forward, closed his eyes for 3 full seconds like he was making a wish he truly believed would come true, and blew out the candle. The smoke curled upward in a thin ribbon, disappearing into the restaurant's warm air, carrying whatever hope a 7-year-old boy had whispered into the darkness. Marcus used the plastic spoon to divide the cupcake into 2 pieces, trying to make them equal even though one piece was clearly bigger. He gave Tyler the larger piece and watched his son take a bite, chocolate frosting smearing across his upper lip. The boy closed his eyes in contentment, savoring something that probably cost less to make than the garnish on the plates Marcus was serving in the dining room, and for a moment, everything felt right. From table 17, Catherine Winters watched it all. She had not meant to. She had been cutting her salmon into precise 1-inch squares, chewing each bite exactly 20 times, a habit she had developed at boarding school when eating was just another task to complete efficiently. Her knife was halfway through another cut when the small movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. A man and a boy huddled over something tiny. A candle. A song hummed so quietly she could not make out the melody. The joy on the child's face when he blew out the flame. The way the man's shoulders relaxed just for a moment, as if he had given his son the world. Something in Catherine's chest cracked. It was a small sound, like ice breaking on a frozen lake when spring first arrives. She set down her fork and knife, the carefully cut piece of salmon forgotten on her plate. Catherine Winters was 34 years old and had built an empire in commercial real estate, the kind of woman whose name appeared in business journals above words like visionary and ruthless and unstoppable. At 28, she had purchased her first building with a loan that would have crushed most people, using $2 million her grandmother had left her with a handwritten note that said, "Use this to build a place you belong." By 30, she had turned that building into 5. Now she owned 47 properties across 9 states, each one managed with the same cold efficiency that had made her successful and utterly alone. She came to Pine and Oak 3 times a week, always alone, always ordering the same thing: grilled salmon with no sauce because she did not trust her body to digest rich food after years of eating meals from her desk at 10 p.m. when the office had emptied out. Steamed vegetables cut into uniform pieces, a single glass of white wine that she sipped exactly 3 times before abandoning because she had learned at some expensive business dinner that successful women nursed their drinks rather than finishing them. The servers knew not to make small talk. Gloria Brennan knew to seat her away from families, away from celebrations, away from anything that might remind her of what she did not have. Catherine had been eating here for 18 months and no one knew who she was. She reserved her table through an app under the name Kay Williams, arrived during off-peak hours dressed in clothes that cost $800 but looked like they came from a department store, and tipped exactly 25% because anything more would draw attention. Tonight she wore a charcoal cashmere sweater that felt like any other sweater and pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, one of the few people who had loved her without conditions. Eleanor Winters had died when Catherine was 14. A stroke that took her so fast the boarding school in Switzerland did not notify Catherine until 3 days later. By the time she flew home, the funeral was over and the house was being packed up, and her mother was already back in London with her new husband, who had a title that opened doors in circles where American money was welcome, as long as it came with silence. Catherine's table was set for one. It was always set for one. A single napkin folded into the shape of a swan. A single water glass perspiring gently in the warm room. A single menu that she never opened because she always ordered the same thing. The solitude had felt like a choice for a long time, like control in a life built on controlling everything around her. But watching that father and son, Catherine felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in a decade. Envy. Not for money or status. She had those in abundance, more than she knew what to do with, more than she had ever wanted if she was honest with herself. She envied the simple fact of being wanted, of having someone wait for you, of mattering in a way that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or shareholder value, or how many properties your company controlled. She lifted her hand, the gesture automatic after 18 months of coming here. The server appeared instantly, a young woman named Sienna Drake who was working her way through graduate school at Boston University and whose smile was genuine enough that Catherine suspected she had not been broken by the service industry yet. Sienna's voice was bright, practiced. "Yes, Miss Williams?" Catherine nodded toward the alcove, her voice coming out quieter than usual. "That man, is he a guest?" Sienna followed her gaze, confusion flickering across her face before understanding replaced it. "That's Marcus. He works here, server and maintenance. That's his son, Tyler." Catherine's hand went to her wine glass. She did not drink. She set it down. "Does he often bring his son to work?" "Only on holidays." Sienna glanced toward the alcove where Marcus was now cleaning up the cupcake wrapper, careful to leave no trace. "He's a single dad. Can't afford a sitter, I think. Gloria lets him as long as the boy stays out of the way." Catherine nodded slowly, her mind processing this information and filing it next to all the other observations she had made about this restaurant over 18 months. The way Gloria Brennan ran the place with a firm hand but never yelled at her staff in front of customers. The way the elderly pianist took requests from children without charging extra. The way the kitchen staff spoke Spanish and laughed at jokes during their breaks, the kind of easy camaraderie that came from people who worked together long enough to become something like family. She looked at her plate. Half the salmon remained, perfect squares of pink flesh that probably tasted like wet cardboard because everything tasted like wet cardboard when you ate alone. She had no appetite. For 10 years she had eaten Christmas dinner alone in this restaurant, or restaurants like it, because it was open, because it was neutral territory, because going home to her empty penthouse apartment on the 48th floor of Millennium Tower felt worse than sitting among strangers pretending to celebrate. She had told herself it was a choice, that she preferred solitude, that relationships were messy and unreliable and ultimately not worth the effort it took to maintain them. She had built a life around this philosophy, constructed an empire on the foundation of not needing anyone. But watching a man who had so little create something so whole with just a cupcake and 15 minutes of stolen time, Catherine understood it had been a lie. Not a lie she told others, a lie she told herself so she could sleep at night in a bed that cost $12,000 and felt like sleeping on stone. She stood. The movement was sudden enough that Sienna stepped back, concern flickering across her face. "Miss Williams, is everything all right?" Catherine's voice came out firmer than she felt. "I need to speak with him." "With Marcus?" "Yes." Sienna's expression shifted to something between concern and confusion, the look of someone trying to figure out if they were about to witness a complaint or something else entirely. "Did he do something wrong?" "No." Catherine's voice was hard now, the CEO voice she used in boardrooms when someone questioned her judgment. "Nothing wrong." She crossed the dining room before she could change her mind. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, each step echoing in her own ears like a countdown to something she could not take back. Conversations did not pause. She was not famous in the way actors or athletes were famous, not the kind of person people recognized from across a room. But a few heads turned anyway, because there was something in her posture, in the way she moved with purpose toward the service alcove, that suggested she had business there. Marcus looked up as she approached. He was in the process of putting the candle back in his pocket, his movements careful, practiced at not drawing attention. Tyler held what remained of the cupcake in both hands, chocolate frosting on his fingers and a smile on his face that was so pure it made Catherine's chest hurt all over again. For a moment, Marcus's face showed confusion, then worry. In his experience, when someone from the dining room approached him during his break, it meant a complaint. A cold entree, a request that had been forgotten, some small failure that would require him to apologize and fix and pray that Gloria did not hear about it. He stood quickly, his body language shifting into the deferential posture of someone who knew his place in the hierarchy of this room. His voice came out careful, polite, stripped of anything personal. "Can I help you with something, ma'am?" Catherine stopped 3 feet away, suddenly aware that she had not thought this through, that she had no plan beyond the overwhelming need to not be alone anymore. Up close, she could see the wear in his shirt collar, the careful way it had been mended with stitches so small they were almost invisible. She could see the tiredness around his eyes, the kind that came from working double shifts and still coming up short at the end of every month. She could see his hands, rough and scarred, the hands of someone who fixed things because calling a professional was a luxury he could not afford. She opened her mouth to speak and found that the words she had prepared, something polite and distant, would not come. Instead, what came out was raw, unfiltered, the kind of truth she had not spoken in years. "Are you celebrating Christmas?" Marcus glanced at his son, then back at her, his confusion deepening. "Just having a quick break, ma'am. I'll be back on the floor in a few minutes." Tyler looked between his father and the woman, his 7-year-old instincts sensing something important was happening, even if he did not understand what. He clutched his notebook tighter, the paper Santa hat slipping sideways on his head. Catherine's next words came out softer, almost a whisper. "It looks lovely." Something in her tone must have reached Marcus because his posture relaxed slightly, the defensive wall coming down just an inch. "Thank you, we were just finishing up." She should have left, should have nodded and walked back to her table and finished her salmon and paid her bill and driven home to her empty penthouse where she could pour herself a real glass of wine and pretend none of this had happened. But her feet would not move. Her throat felt tight. When she spoke again, her voice broke on the second word. "I don't mean to intrude, but I was wondering." She stopped. This was absurd. She was a woman who negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, who had stared down boards of directors and investors and lawyers who thought they could intimidate her. She could not ask a simple question of a man she did not know. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. "Would it be all right if I joined you?" Marcus stared at her. Tyler tilted his head, his paper Santa hat shifting to one side, chocolate frosting still on his fingers. The alcove fell silent except for the distant sound of the dining room and the kitchen and the pianist who had moved on to the first Noel. Catherine felt her face flush, felt the familiar instinct to retreat, to put her armor back on and walk away. "I'm sorry. This is inappropriate. Forget I asked." She turned to leave. But Tyler spoke up, his voice clear and certain in the way children's voices could be when they had not yet learned to second-guess kindness. "You can sit with us. We have an extra chair." Catherine looked at the boy. He was pointing to a third folding chair leaning against the wall, the metal frame dull and the seat slightly torn. His expression was open, guileless. He smiled at her the way children smiled before the world taught them to be suspicious, before they learned that some people wanted things from you and you had to figure out what those things were before you let them close. Marcus glanced at his son, then at Catherine. He saw something in her face that he recognized because he had seen it in his own mirror on the mornings when Tyler was still asleep and the apartment was too quiet and the weight of being the only person responsible for another human life felt like it might crush him. He saw loneliness, the kind that no amount of money or success could fill, the kind that ate at you from the inside until you forgot what it felt like to matter to someone. His voice came out slowly, carefully, like he was testing each word before letting it loose. "It's not much, but you're welcome to join us." Catherine's breath caught. Marcus unfolded the third chair, the metal legs scraping against the floor. He set it at the small plastic table, across from where Tyler sat with his notebook and his paper hat and his piece of cupcake. The alcove was small, meant for one person on break, maybe two if they were friendly. With 3 people, their knees nearly touched under the table, but Catherine sat as if it were the finest seat she had ever occupied, lowering herself onto the torn vinyl with a grace that suggested boardrooms and corner offices. Tyler, ever the host despite being 7 years old and sitting in a restaurant alcove, pushed the remaining piece of cupcake toward her. His voice was earnest, hopeful. "Would you like some?" Catherine looked at the cupcake, at the smeared frosting and the crumbs on the plastic table, and felt something break loose inside her chest. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I couldn't. That's yours. Dad says sharing makes things better." Tyler glanced at his father for confirmation, and Marcus nodded, a small movement that said he had taught his son this because it was true. Because in their world, sharing was not optional. It was survival. Catherine carefully broke off a small piece of the cupcake, the frosting sticking to her fingers. She ate it slowly, tasting chocolate and vanilla and something else she could not name, something that felt like warmth. It was the kind of sweet that came from a discount bakery, artificial and too sugary, but it tasted like something more. It tasted like the first real thing she had eaten in years. Tyler began to talk. He told her about his school, about the snowflake craft he made in art class where he cut the paper so carefully. All 6 points were exactly the same. He told her about his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who let him read chapter books during quiet time because he finished his work faster than the other kids. He told her about the classroom hamster who escaped last week and was found sleeping in the principal's inbox, curled up on a stack of detention slips. Marcus sat quietly, watching his son with the kind of attention that made it clear this child was the center of his universe, the reason he got up every morning and pressed his father's shirt and worked 2 jobs and did math that never added up. He interjected occasionally, adding details Tyler forgot, laughing at the parts that were funny, his whole body relaxing in a way that suggested he did not get to do this often. Did not get to just sit and listen to his son talk without worrying about the next table or the next bill or the next crisis waiting around the corner. Catherine listened. She asked questions. She laughed when Tyler described how the hamster had somehow gotten into the principal's coffee mug and Mr. Henderson had almost taken a sip before he noticed the tail. For 20 minutes, Catherine Winters forgot that she was a CEO, forgot that she owned buildings in 9 states, forgot that her calendar was booked 3 months in advance with meetings and calls and decisions that affected hundreds of employees. She was just a woman sitting at a folding table with a father and son, eating a shared cupcake, listening to a 7-year-old boy talk about his life like it was the most important thing in the world. Then someone recognized her. It happened quickly. A man at table 8 stood to use the restroom, walking past the alcove with the distracted air of someone checking his phone. He glanced up, did a double take, stopped. His eyes widened with the recognition that comes from seeing someone famous in an unexpected context, like spotting a movie star at the grocery store buying toilet paper. Robert Hastings was 58 years old and had made his fortune in commercial development, the kind of money that came from knowing which neighborhoods would gentrify before anyone else figured it out. He had worked with Catherine's firm on 2 projects, both times leaving impressed by her ruthlessness and slightly intimidated by the way she could calculate risk faster than his entire team combined. He pulled out his phone, opened Twitter, and typed with the speed of someone who had never learned that some moments were better left unshared. Spotted Kate Winters slumming it with restaurant staff on Christmas Eve. Guess even billionaires need a charity photo op. He attached a photo, slightly blurry but clear enough to show Catherine sitting at a plastic table with a man in a server's uniform and a child wearing a paper Santa hat. He hit send and walked to the bathroom, already imagining the likes and retweets, the small thrill of being the first to spot something newsworthy. The tweet went viral in the way things do when they touch a nerve. Within 10 minutes, it had 847 retweets and climbing. People who followed Boston business news saw it first. Then it spread to the wider world of internet users who loved nothing more than watching rich people get caught doing things that seemed performative. Comments flooded in, some defending Catherine, most assuming the worst because that was easier than imagining complexity. Rich people always gotta make everything about them, even on Christmas. That poor family probably just wanted a quiet meal. This is what late-stage capitalism looks like, people. Actually really nice of her, though? Nice would be paying her workers a living wage, not sitting with them for Instagram. The notifications lit up phones across the restaurant. Sienna Drake, the server who had told Catherine about Marcus, checked her phone during a lull and gasped loud enough that 2 other servers looked over. She showed them the screen. Within seconds, every employee who worked the floor knew that the quiet woman at table 17, who always ordered the same thing and tipped exactly 25%, was Catherine Winters, the Catherine Winters, and she was currently sitting in their break alcove with Marcus Reed and his kid. Gloria Brennan was in her small office behind the kitchen, doing end-of-night inventory that should have been done yesterday, but Christmas Eve was chaos, and she had learned to let some things slide. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. Finally, she picked it up, saw the messages flooding her notifications, opened Twitter, and felt her stomach drop. She moved fast for a woman her age who had been on her feet for 11 hours. She pushed through the kitchen, past the dishwashing station where Miguel looked up in surprise, through the swinging door that separated the back from the front, and stopped at the edge of the alcove. Marcus was laughing at something Tyler had said, his face open in a way Gloria rarely saw, because servers learned to keep their real expressions hidden. Catherine had her hands wrapped around a paper cup of water that Tyler had gotten her from the dispenser, and she was listening with the kind of focus that suggested she actually cared about whatever 7-year-old wisdom was being dispensed. Tyler was showing her his notebook, pointing at a drawing of a house with a chimney, explaining something in detail. Gloria's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Her tone was tight with the kind of controlled panic that came from suddenly realizing your small restaurant was about to become the center of a social media storm. Marcus. A word. Marcus looked up, saw Gloria's face, and knew immediately that something had gone wrong. He stood, the chair scraping against the floor, his body already tensing with the anticipation of whatever crisis had emerged. "Give me a second, buddy." He followed Gloria into the narrow hallway between the kitchen and the dining room, a space that smelled like cleaning chemicals and old grease. She showed him her phone without preamble. He read the tweet once, then again, his face cycling through confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like anger mixed with humiliation. His voice came out flat, stripped of emotion because that was the only way to get through this. "How many people have seen it?" "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands by now." Gloria's expression was a mixture of sympathy and resignation. "Marcus, I need to know. Did you know who she was?" "No." The word came out hard. "She just asked to sit with us." Tyler said yes. "She's Kate Winters. She owns this building. She owns 46 other buildings. She's worth $300 million. Gloria watched his face carefully. "She bought this property 3 months ago. I found out 2 weeks ago when the lawyers called about restructuring our lease." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest, spreading outward like frost on a window. He looked back toward the alcove where Catherine still sat with Tyler, where his son was showing her his drawings like she was someone who mattered, someone who cared. The cold spread further. She was pretending. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles going white. Playing dress up. What, she wanted to see how the other half lives on Christmas Eve? "I don't think," Gloria started, but Marcus was already moving. He walked back to the alcove with purpose, each step measured and controlled because if he let himself move faster, he might do something he would regret. Catherine looked up as he approached, her expression shifting from the open warmth she had been showing Tyler to something more guarded as she read his body language. Tyler's voice was bright, oblivious. "Dad, I was just telling Miss Kate about the house I want to build when I grow up. She said she knows about buildings." Marcus's voice came out colder than he intended, colder than he had ever spoken to his son, and he saw Tyler flinch. "Tyler, go to the back. Wait by the dishwashing station." "But Dad—" "Now!" The boy scrambled out of his chair, clutching his notebook, his paper Santa hat falling off and landing on the floor. He looked between his father and Catherine with eyes that were starting to fill with tears, confused and hurt by the sudden change in atmosphere. He ran toward the kitchen, his footsteps echoing. Catherine stood, her body moving into a defensive posture that was pure instinct, the CEO armor snapping back into place. Her voice was careful, controlled. "Marcus, I can explain." His words cut through hers, each one landing with precision. "Did you think this was funny?" "What?" "Coming down here, sitting with us, playing pretend." He gestured toward the dining room where people were starting to turn and look because raised voices in a restaurant always drew attention. What was this, research? A story you'll tell at your next board meeting about the time you ate a discount cupcake with the help? Catherine's face went pale. She reached for her purse, the instinct to fix things with money so ingrained it happened automatically. No, that's not. I wasn't. Marcus's laugh was harsh, bitter. You own this building. Gloria just told me. You bought it 3 months ago and you've been coming here playing dress up as a normal person. Did it make you feel good? Did it make you feel connected to the common folk? I didn't know you worked here. Catherine's voice was rising now, the careful control slipping. I've been coming here for over a year. I didn't know anyone, I just wanted a place where I could be. Be what? Poor? You wanted to try on poverty like a costume. Marcus took a step closer, his voice dropping but losing none of its edge. My son thought you cared. He showed you his drawings. He told you about his life, and you were just slumming it. Catherine's hands were shaking. She gripped her purse tighter to hide it. That's not fair. Fair? Marcus's voice cracked on the word. You want to talk about fair? I work 2 jobs to keep a roof over my kid's head. I buy cupcakes from the discount rack because that's all I can afford. I press my dead father's shirt every Sunday because I can't afford new ones. And you sit here with your $300 million net worth and pretend to care because it makes you feel better about yourself. That's not what happened. Catherine's voice was barely above a whisper now, the words coming out rough with emotion. I saw you with Tyler and I just wanted to not be alone. Just for a few minutes. I wanted to know what it felt like to matter to someone. You can't buy that. Marcus's voice was quieter now, but no less cutting. You can't just sit down and purchase belonging like it's another property in your portfolio. I know that. I know. Catherine's eyes were wet now, tears threatening to spill over. God, don't you think I know that? Then why did you do it? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with accusation and hurt, and something else neither of them wanted to name. Catherine opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Around them, the restaurant had gone quieter, conversations dying as more people noticed the confrontation. Phones were out now, some people recording, others texting, the moment being captured and distributed in real time. Gloria appeared at Marcus's elbow, her voice low and urgent. Both of you need to take this somewhere else. Now, or I'm going to have a bigger problem than I already do. Catherine turned without another word, walking toward the front of the restaurant. She did not collect her coat from the hostess stand, did not stop to pay her bill, just pushed through the front door into the December cold. Marcus watched her go, his chest tight with anger, and something else he refused to examine too closely. The street was empty except for a few cars passing, their headlights cutting through the dark. Catherine stood on the sidewalk, the cold hitting her face like a physical force. She was not dressed for this, her cashmere sweater barely adequate against the wind that came off the harbor and cut through the city streets. Snow had started to fall, light and tentative, the flakes melting the moment they touched the ground. She pulled out her phone, opened her car service app, and requested a ride. 3 minutes away. She stood there shaking, partly from cold and partly from something deeper, watching her breath mist in the streetlights and feeling the weight of the last hour settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. Her phone buzzed with notifications. She looked at the screen and saw her name trending, saw the tweet that had started it all, saw the thousands of comments from strangers who knew nothing about her except what they could glean from a grainy photo and their own assumptions. She read a few and wished she had not. Rich people really think poverty is an aesthetic. Maybe she was doing recon before raising their rent. Y'all are too cynical, she probably has a good heart. Having a good heart doesn't excuse using working people as props. She closed the app without reading more. The car pulled up, a black Lexus that looked out of place on this street. She got in, gave her address, and sat in silence as the driver navigated through streets still busy with last-minute Christmas Eve travelers. Her penthouse was 12 minutes away and might as well have been on another planet. Inside the restaurant, Marcus stood in the hallway trying to get his breathing under control. His hands were still clenched into fists and he had to consciously relax them, flexing his fingers to get the blood flowing again. Gloria was talking to him, but he could not process the words, could only hear the rushing in his ears and the replay of the last 10 minutes. Tyler appeared from the kitchen, his face blotchy with tears. He was holding his notebook against his chest like armor. His voice was small, frightened. "Did I do something wrong?" The question broke through Marcus's anger like a hammer through glass. He knelt down, pulling his son into a hug. "No, buddy. No, you didn't do anything wrong." "Then why did you yell?" Tyler's voice was muffled against his father's shoulder. "Why did Miss Kate leave?" Marcus did not have an answer that would make sense to a 7-year-old. He did not have an answer that made sense to himself. So he just held his son and let the boy cry, and tried to ignore the eyes of the other servers who were pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Gloria sent him home early. She did not ask if he wanted to go, just told him to clock out and take Tyler and get some rest. Marcus changed out of his server uniform in the cramped employee bathroom, putting on jeans and a sweater that had a hole in the elbow he kept meaning to fix. Tyler waited by the back door, his paper Santa hat crumpled in his hands. They walked to the bus stop 3 blocks away, neither of them talking. The snow was coming down harder now, accumulating on the sidewalks in a thin layer that would be gone by morning. The bus was late, as it always was on holidays, and they stood in the shelter watching cars pass and people hurry by with shopping bags and wrapped presents. When the bus finally came, they rode in silence. Tyler pressed his face against the window, watching the decorated houses pass by, the Christmas lights blinking in patterns that were supposed to represent joy. Marcus stared at his hands, at the calluses and scars, and wondered when he had become the kind of person who yelled at strangers in front of his kid. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had been subdivided so many times the original floor plan was unrecognizable. 1 bedroom, a bathroom with a tub that drained slowly, a kitchen with appliances that were old when Marcus moved in 5 years ago. The living room barely fit a couch and a television that got 3 channels reliably. But it was clean, and the heat worked most of the time, and the landlord left them alone as long as the rent came on time. Tyler went straight to his room and closed the door. Marcus stood in the living room, still in his coat, and listened to the sounds of his son crying through the thin walls. He wanted to go in there, wanted to explain and apologize and make it right, but the words would not come. Instead, he sat on the couch and put his head in his hands and tried to understand what had just happened. He replayed the conversation in his mind, dissecting each sentence. Catherine's face when he accused her of slumming it. The way her hands shook when she tried to explain. The genuine hurt in her voice when she said she just wanted to not be alone. His own anger, hot and righteous, fueled by years of being looked down on by people who had more money and fewer problems. But underneath the anger was something else. Shame. Because Tyler had invited her to sit with them, and she had accepted with a gratitude that seemed real. She had listened to his son talk about hamsters and snowflakes, with the kind of attention most adults did not bother giving to children. She had broken off the smallest piece of cupcake, like she was afraid of taking too much, like she understood what it meant to share something precious. Marcus got up and knocked on Tyler's door. His voice was soft. "Can I come in?" A pause, then a small response. "Okay." Tyler was sitting on his bed, the notebook open in his lap. He had been looking at his drawing of the house with the chimney, the one he had shown Catherine. Marcus sat down next to him, the mattress dipping under his weight. "I'm sorry I yelled." I shouldn't have done that. Tyler did not look up from the drawing. Was Miss Kate bad? No, buddy. She wasn't bad. Then why were you mad at her? Marcus struggled to find words that would make sense. I thought she was pretending to be our friend when she was really just curious. Like we were something interesting to look at, but not real people. She didn't act like that. Tyler's voice was certain, the clarity of a child who had not yet learned to doubt his instincts. She was sad. I could tell. The observation hit Marcus harder than it should have. He thought about Catherine's face when she asked to join them, the vulnerability that had flickered there before she sat down, the way she had eaten that piece of cupcake, savoring it like it was something precious. The question she had whispered, would it be so bad if Tyler thought of me as someone who stays? His son was right. She had been sad. The kind of sad that Marcus recognized because he wore it himself sometimes, late at night when Tyler was asleep and the apartment was too quiet, and the weight of being solely responsible for another human life felt crushing. The loneliness of people who had no one to call when things went wrong. You're right. Marcus put his arm around Tyler's shoulders. She was sad. And I was mean to her because I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that she would hurt you, that she would make you think you had a new friend and then leave. The words came out raw, more honest than Marcus had intended. Like Mom did. Tyler leaned against his father, small and warm. I don't think Miss Kate is like Mom. Maybe not. Marcus kissed the top of his son's head. Maybe I was wrong. They sat there for a while, father and son, in a bedroom that barely fit a twin bed and a dresser. Outside the window, snow continued to fall on a city that would not remember it by morning. Christmas lights blinked from neighboring buildings, their colors reflecting off the glass. Finally, Tyler spoke, his voice hopeful. Can you tell her you're sorry? I don't know if I'll see her again. You could find her. She comes to the restaurant all the time. Marcus wanted to explain that it was more complicated than that Catherine Winters probably never wanted to see him again after what he had said, that people like her did not give second chances to people like him. But his son was looking at him with such hope that he could not bring himself to crush it. Maybe. It was the best he could offer. We'll see. Tyler seemed satisfied with this non-answer, the way children often are when they sense that pushing further would not yield better results. He returned to his drawing, adding details to the house, his pencil moving in careful strokes. Marcus left him there and went to the kitchen. He made himself a cup of instant coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like chemicals but had enough caffeine to keep him functional. He sat at the small table and pulled out his phone, navigating to Twitter with the kind of dread usually reserved for opening medical bills. The tweet had exploded. Over 10,000 retweets now. Quote tweets arguing about class and privilege and the performative nature of charity. Someone had identified the restaurant and posted its address. Someone else had found Marcus's Facebook profile from 3 years ago when he still bothered updating it. His name now circulating among strangers who felt entitled to judge his life based on a single photograph. He read through the comments with a sick fascination. Some people defending him, calling him a victim of rich people using poverty as aesthetic. Others defending Catherine, saying she was just trying to connect with people and got caught. A few people pointing out that maybe everyone was overreacting to a woman eating a cupcake with strangers on Christmas Eve. The notification came in around 11 p.m., a direct message request from an account with no profile picture and a handle that was just a string of numbers. He almost ignored it, but something made him click. This is Declan Hart. I'm Catherine Winters' executive assistant. She asked me to pass along her contact information if you're willing to speak with her. No pressure. She understands if you prefer not to. Below the message was a phone number. Marcus stared at the screen for a long time. He could ignore it. Should ignore it. He had made his position clear. She had made hers clear, or failed to make it clear, or whatever had happened in that alcove that ended with both of them hurt and angry and scattered across social media. But Tyler's words echoed in his head. She was sad. I could tell. He saved the number. He did not call it. Not yet. But he saved it. Catherine sat in her penthouse on the 48th floor and watched the city spread out below her like a circuit board, all lights and straight lines. The living room was done in minimalist Scandinavian style, white and gray with clean edges and no clutter. There were no photographs on the walls, no personal items on the shelves, nothing that would indicate anyone actually lived here rather than just existing in the space between business trips. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, 8 feet tall, professionally decorated that morning by a service she paid $400 to set up and would pay another $200 to remove in a week. There were no presents underneath. There had not been presents under her tree in 20 years, not since her grandmother died and the pretense of family gatherings ended. Her phone would not stop buzzing. Messages from her assistant Declan, from board members who had seen the tweet, from business contacts expressing concern or curiosity or thinly veiled judgment. She turned it off. Let them wait. Let them wonder. She was tired of performing for people who would never see her as anything but a balance sheet. She poured herself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than Marcus made in a week and took it to the window. The snow was visible against the dark, falling past her window in swirls that would pile up on rooftops and streets below. She wondered if Marcus and Tyler had made it home safely. She wondered if the boy still had his notebook, if he would finish that drawing of the house with the chimney. She wondered if she had destroyed the only genuine moment she had experienced in a decade. The wine tasted like nothing. Everything tasted like nothing lately. She set the glass down and pulled out her phone, turning it back on to send one message to Declan. If Marcus Reed contacts you, give him my number. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I wasn't pretending. She hit send and turned the phone off again. Outside her window, the city continued its indifferent celebration. Somewhere down there, Marcus was probably putting his son to bed. Somewhere down there, families were gathered around trees and tables, sharing meals and laughter, and the kind of belonging that could not be purchased or negotiated or acquired through careful planning. Catherine sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of her loneliness. It was vast and cold and familiar as an old enemy. She had learned to live with it, to build a life around it, to tell herself it was a choice rather than a sentence. But tonight, after tasting something different for 20 minutes in a restaurant alcove, the loneliness felt unbearable. She thought about her grandmother, about the note that had come with the $2 million. Use this to build a place you belong. Eleanor Winters had meant well, but she had been wrong about what could be built with money. Catherine had constructed an empire, but she had not built a home. She had filled her calendar, but not her life. She had succeeded at everything except the one thing that mattered. Her phone buzzed once, a message from Declan. He saved your number. Didn't call, but he saved it. It was something. Not much, but something. Catherine closed her eyes and let herself hope for the first time in years that maybe, possibly, there could be a second chance for people who made mistakes out of loneliness rather than malice. The snow fell harder now, blanketing the city in white. In apartments across Boston, families settled in for the night, children finally asleep with visions of tomorrow's presents dancing in their heads. In a third-floor walk-up in Dorchester, Marcus lay awake listening to his son breathe in the next room, a phone number saved in his contacts and a decision he was not ready to make. In a penthouse on the 48th floor, Catherine Winters sat on imported hardwood and watched the city lights blur through tears she had not allowed herself to shed in public since she was 14 years old. Christmas Eve ended as it always did, with silence and separation and the hollow promise that tomorrow would be better. Neither of them believed it. But both of them, in their separate darknesses, held on to the memory of 20 minutes when the loneliness had lifted, and something like connection had been possible. Marcus woke on Christmas morning to the sound of Tyler moving around in the next room, the floorboards creaking under small feet trying to be quiet. The digital clock on his nightstand read 6:43. He lay there for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere he would never visit, and felt the weight of yesterday settle back onto his chest like someone had placed a concrete block there while he slept. The phone number sat in his contacts, undialed. He had looked at it 3 times before falling asleep, his thumb hovering over the call button. Some part of him wanting to reach out and some other part insisting that apologizing to a woman worth $300 million for, calling out her behavior, was exactly the kind of self-betrayal that kept people like him in their place. Tyler appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas with the dinosaurs on them that were getting too small, but Marcus kept putting off replacing because new clothes cost money, and the old ones still technically fit. The boy's eyes were red from crying the night before, but his expression was hopeful in the way only children managed, like sleep had reset something that adults could not fix so easily. "Merry Christmas, Dad." Marcus sat up, forced a smile that felt more real than he expected. "Merry Christmas, buddy. You sleep okay?" "Yeah." Tyler came into the room, climbing onto the bed with the unconscious ease of a child who had done this 1,000 times. "Can we call Miss Kate today? To say Merry Christmas?" The question landed with the weight of inevitability. Marcus had known it was coming, had prepared several answers during the night, but now that the moment arrived, all his careful reasoning evaporated. He looked at his son's face, at the hope there mixed with something more fragile, and felt his resistance crumble. "Maybe later. Let's have breakfast first." They ate cereal from boxes that were store brand because the name brand stuff cost $2 more and $2 was $2. Tyler talked about Christmas at school last week, about the Secret Santa exchange where he had gotten a set of colored pencils from Emma Rodriguez and given Danny Walsh a puzzle book from the dollar store. Marcus listened and responded and tried not to think about the phone in his pocket. After breakfast, Tyler went to his room to draw while Marcus did the dishes. The apartment was quiet except for the pipes rattling and the occasional sound of someone walking around upstairs. He washed each dish carefully, methodically, using the task to avoid the decision he knew he had to make. His phone rang at 9:30. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. The voice on the other end was male, young, professional. "Mr. Reed, this is Declan Hart. I'm calling on behalf of Catherine Winters. She wanted me to reach out personally." Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "She couldn't call herself?" "She was afraid you wouldn't answer if you saw her number." Declan's tone was careful, diplomatic, the voice of someone who had mediated difficult conversations before. "She wanted me to tell you that she understands if you don't want to speak with her, but she's hoping you'll give her a chance to explain, in person." "There's nothing to explain." Marcus kept his voice low so Tyler would not hear. "I get it. She's rich. She was bored. She wanted to see how the other half lives. Tale as old as time." That's not what happened. Declan's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Look, I've worked for Catherine for 3 years. I've never seen her like she was last night. She called me at midnight crying, Mr. Reed. Catherine Winters doesn't cry. She doesn't let people close enough to hurt her. But you did. And she's terrified she destroyed the only real connection she's made in 20 years. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus could hear Tyler singing something in his room, off-key but happy, the resilience of childhood on full display. He thought about Catherine's face when Tyler invited her to sit, the naked gratitude there before she masked it with politeness, the way her hands shook when he accused her of slumming it. What does she want? To talk, just talk. She's at her office. She's at Tiquitad. If you're willing, I can send a car." Marcus looked around his apartment, at the peeling paint and the second-hand furniture and the life he had built from nothing but stubbornness and love for his son. Then he thought about the penthouse on the 48th floor and the woman who owned buildings, but could not figure out how to belong anywhere. "Give me an hour." He told Tyler they were going out, packed the boy's notebook and some snacks in case they got hungry, and dressed in his one pair of nice jeans and a sweater his mother had given him before she died. Tyler wore his best shirt, the button-down Marcus saved for school pictures and holidays, and fixed his hair without being asked because even at 7 he understood that some occasions required effort. The car arrived at 10:30, a black sedan with leather seats that smelled like money and air freshener. The driver was professional and silent, navigating through streets quiet with Christmas morning. They passed houses with cars in driveways and wrapping paper visible through windows, families doing what families did on December 25th. Tyler pressed his nose against the window. "Where are we going?" "To see Miss Kate. She wants to talk." "Are you still mad at her?" Marcus considered the question, turning it over in his mind like a stone he was examining for flaws. "I don't know, maybe, but your grandmother used to say that staying angry takes more energy than forgiving someone. And I'm too tired to stay angry." "Grandma was smart." "Yeah, she was." The financial district was deserted, office buildings dark except for security lights. The car pulled up to a tower of glass and steel, 40 stories of expensive real estate that probably generated more income in a month than Marcus would make in his lifetime. The driver opened their door, gestured toward the entrance where a security guard waited. The guard checked Marcus's ID, made a call, then directed them to the elevators. 28th floor. She's expecting you." They rode up in silence, Tyler watching the floor numbers climb with the fascination of a kid who still thought elevators were magic. The doors opened onto a reception area done in dark wood and chrome, expensive art on the walls that Marcus did not recognize but assumed was important. Declan Hart stood waiting, a young man in his 20s with carefully styled hair and a sweater that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. "Mr. Reed, thank you for coming." Declan shook his hand, then smiled down at Tyler. "And you must be Tyler. Catherine told me about your drawings. She said you're very talented." Tyler beamed, the praise hitting him exactly where it needed to. "She liked my house with the chimney." "She did." Declan led them down a hallway lined with photographs of buildings, each one presumably part of Catherine's portfolio. "She's in her office. Fair warning, she's nervous. I've never seen her nervous before." He opened a door and stepped aside. Marcus took Tyler's hand and walked through. The office was large but not ostentatious, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the harbor that would cost millions if you could buy it. A desk sat in front of the windows, clean except for a laptop and a single photograph frame that Marcus could not see from this angle. Catherine stood by the windows, her back to them, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked casual but probably cost what Marcus made in a month. She turned when they entered. Her face was bare of makeup, eyes red-rimmed like she had been crying, or had not slept, or both. When she saw Tyler, something in her expression cracked open. "Hi, Tyler." The boy let go of his father's hand and walked over to her with the fearlessness of someone who had not yet learned that powerful people were supposed to be intimidating. "Hi, Miss Kate." "Miss." "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." Catherine knelt down to his level, her voice thick. "I'm sorry I left so quickly last night. I didn't mean to make you sad." "It's okay. Dad said you were probably sad too." Tyler pulled his notebook from under his arm. "I finished the drawing. Want to see?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Tyler opened the notebook to show a house with a chimney, but this time there were 3 stick figures in front of it. One tall, one small, one in between. He had labeled them in careful letters. Dad, me, Miss Kate. Catherine's hands shook as she took the notebook. She looked at the drawing for a long time, her breathing uneven, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "This is beautiful. Thank you. You can keep it if you want. I can make another one." She looked at Marcus over Tyler's head, her eyes asking a question she could not voice in front of the boy. Marcus nodded once. Catherine carefully tore the page from the notebook, folded it with reverence, and tucked it in her pocket. "I'll keep it safe, I promise." Declan appeared in the doorway. "Tyler, I have a conference room down the hall with some art supplies if you want to draw more. Your dad and Catherine need to talk for a bit." Tyler looked at Marcus for permission. Marcus nodded. "Be good, I'll come get you in a few minutes." The boy followed Declan out, chattering about the buildings he had seen on the drive over. The door closed behind them, leaving Marcus and Catherine alone in the office with the harbor spread out behind them like a painting. The silence stretched. Catherine moved to her desk, not sitting, just standing there with her hands pressed against the wood like she needed something solid to hold on to. Her voice when she finally spoke was raw with exhaustion. "I'm sorry for not telling you who I was, for letting you think I was someone else." Marcus moved to the window, keeping distance between them because he still did not know what he felt, and proximity would make it harder to think clearly. "Were you pretending at the restaurant?" "No." The word came out fast, desperate. "God, no. I've been going there for 18 months. Same table, same meal, 3 times a week. I never told anyone my real name because I wanted one place where I could just exist without being Catherine Winters. Where I could be nobody." "You're not nobody. To most people, I'm a net worth and a business opportunity. To you, I was just someone who wanted to share a cupcake." Catherine's voice cracked. "Do you know how rare that is? Someone looking at me and not seeing dollar signs?" Marcus turned to face her. "You own this building. You own 46 others. You could buy and sell my entire life without noticing the dent in your bank account. How am I supposed to look at you and not see that? Because that's not who I am." She moved away from the desk, her movements agitated. "That's what I have. It's not who I am." "Then who are you?" The question stopped her. She stood there in her expensive jeans and her cashmere sweater in an office that commanded a view of the city, and for a moment she looked as lost as anyone Marcus had ever seen. "I'm someone who grew up in boarding schools because my parents couldn't be bothered to raise me themselves. I'm someone whose grandmother died alone in a hospital while I was taking exams in Switzerland, because the school didn't think it was important enough to notify me for 3 days. I'm someone who built an empire because I thought if I was successful enough, my father would finally call me back. He hasn't, not once in 6 years." Her voice was getting louder, years of compressed emotion forcing its way out. "I'm someone who eats dinner alone at the same restaurant 3 times a week because it's the only place where servers are nice to me without wanting something. I'm someone who saw you with your son and remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. And I asked to sit with you because I was so goddamn lonely I couldn't stand another minute of it." Marcus watched her chest heave, watched tears stream down her face, watched the careful armor she wore crack apart. "I'm sorry I accused you of slumming it." "You weren't wrong." Catherine wiped at her face with the back of her hand, a gesture so unlike the polished CEO that it made Marcus's chest hurt. "I was observing. Not consciously, but I was. Watching you be a good father. Watching Tyler love you unconditionally. Watching you create a family with almost nothing, and using it to avoid how empty my own life is. So what changed? Tyler invited me to sit." Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. "He didn't know who I was. He just saw someone alone on Christmas Eve and thought that was sad. 7 years old, and he has more emotional intelligence than I've developed in 34 years. Marcus crossed the space between them, stopping a few feet away. "He's a good kid." "He is. And you're a good father. And I destroyed the best thing that's happened to me in 2 decades because I couldn't figure out how to be honest. Catherine looked up at him, her face blotchy and vulnerable. I don't know how to do this. How to be close to people. How to let anyone see the parts of me that aren't successful and powerful and in control. I've spent my whole life perfecting the art of not needing anyone. How's that working out for you? The question was gentle, without judgment, and somehow that made it cut deeper. Catherine laughed, the sound broken and wet. Terribly. It's working terribly. They stood there in the expensive office with its million-dollar view, two people from different worlds connected by loneliness and a 7-year-old's kindness. Marcus thought about his apartment with its water-stained ceiling, his job pressing shirts that had belonged to his dead father, the way he counted dollars and pennies and still came up short every month. He thought about Catherine in her penthouse, eating meals alone, surrounded by success that meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. You said you wanted a place you belong. Why did you buy the restaurant building? Catherine wiped her face again, composing herself slowly. Because it's the closest thing to home I have. I thought if I owned it, I could protect it. Make sure it didn't close or get turned into luxury condos. Make sure Gloria and the staff kept their jobs. Make sure there was still somewhere I could go and feel normal for an hour. You could have just eaten there. I needed to do more than take. I needed to give something back, even if no one knew it was me. She walked to her desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. These are the plans my lawyers drew up for the building. Better pay for employees, full health insurance, upgraded equipment. I was going to announce it after the new year. Marcus took the folder, flipped through documents he only partially understood. Numbers and clauses and legal language, but the intent was clear. Catherine had been planning to pour money into making Pine and Oak better for the people who worked there, including him, and had told no one because she did not want credit or gratitude or acknowledgement. Why didn't you tell Gloria? Because then she would know I owned the building, and she would treat me differently. Everyone treats me differently once they know. Catherine's voice was steady now, the emotion locked back down. I wanted one place where I could just be Kate, not Catherine Winters, not the CEO, just Kate who eats salmon and tips 25% and doesn't bother anyone. Marcus set the folder on the desk. His anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something more complicated, something that felt like understanding, mixed with sadness, for both of them. Tyler thinks you're lonely like I am. He said he could tell. He's right. I am. Catherine met his eyes. I spent last night in my penthouse drinking wine that costs more than your weekly paycheck and realizing that money can't buy the thing I actually want. Which is ridiculous because I've spent 15 years believing that money could buy anything. What do you want? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility and fear and the kind of vulnerability that neither of them knew how to handle. Catherine took a breath, held it, let it out slowly. I want what you have with Tyler. Someone who cares if I come home. Someone who notices if I'm sad. Someone whose face lights up when they see me, not because of what I can do for them, but just because I'm there. Her voice dropped lower. I want a family. And I have no idea how to build one because all I know how to build is real estate. Marcus thought about his son in the conference room, drawing pictures of houses with chimneys. Thought about the way Tyler had included Catherine in his drawing without hesitation, like it was obvious that she belonged there. Thought about his own loneliness, the nights after Tyler went to bed when the apartment felt too quiet, and he wondered if this was all his life would ever be. You don't build a family, you choose one, and then you show up every day and do the work. I don't know how to do that. Neither did I. You think I had any idea what I was doing when Sarah left and I was alone with a 2-year-old who could barely breathe? I learned. You figure it out because not figuring it out isn't an option. Catherine's expression shifted, something like hope flickering there before caution smothered it. Are you saying you'll give me a chance? Even after I lied by omission and you found out on Twitter and I ruined Christmas Eve? I'm saying Tyler drew a picture with you in it. And he doesn't do that lightly. He drew his mother once, 2 years ago, and hasn't drawn her since. He knows who stays and who leaves. If he thinks you're someone who stays, maybe you are. I want to be. I just don't know if I know how. Marcus crossed the remaining distance between them, close enough now to see the fine lines around her eyes, the exhaustion that wealth could not hide. Start by being honest. No more fake names, no more pretending to be someone else. You're Catherine Winters and you own buildings and you're lonely. That's the truth. We'll work with it. We? The word came out tentative, like she was afraid to hope. You asked to join us for Christmas Eve dinner. Invitation's still open. We're having instant mashed potatoes and chicken from a can because that's what I can afford. You're welcome to come eat it at our apartment if you can stomach food that doesn't cost $47 a plate. Catherine's laugh was surprised, genuine. I would like that. Very much. Good. Because Tyler will never forgive me if I don't bring you back to see his drawings. And I'm tired of being the reason my kid cries. Marcus paused. But I need you to understand something. I can't afford to let you into our lives if you're going to disappear when it gets hard or boring, or you remember that you have a penthouse and a company and a life that doesn't include a broke single dad and his kid. I won't disappear. Catherine's voice was firm, certain. I told you last night I wanted to know what it felt like to matter to someone. Now I do. I'm not giving that up. People say a lot of things. I know, but I mean it. You want proof? She pulled out her phone, opened an app, showed him the screen. I canceled my New Year's trip to Aspen, rescheduled 2 board meetings, cleared my calendar for the next month because I'd rather spend time figuring out how to be part of a family than sitting in another conference room negotiating another acquisition that won't make me any happier. Marcus looked at the screen, at the canceled events and rescheduled meetings, the tangible evidence of shifting priorities. It was not a promise, but it was something. A start. Okay, but I'm warning you now. My apartment is about 1/10 the size of this office, and the heat is temperamental, and Tyler talks constantly about dinosaurs and space and whatever else he's interested in that week. It's not glamorous. I don't want glamorous. I want real. Catherine smiled, tentative but genuine. I've had glamorous. It's terrible. They walked to the conference room together, not touching, but close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume. Something subtle and expensive that probably had a French name. Declan had set Tyler up with a full art kit, professional grade-colored pencils and thick paper and markers in every shade. The boy was deep in concentration, working on what looked like a Christmas tree. He looked up when they entered, his face breaking into a grin. Dad! Miss Kate! Look what Mr. Declan gave me! Catherine knelt beside him, examining his work with genuine interest. That's beautiful. Are those ornaments? Yeah, and presents underneath. This one's for you. He pointed at a carefully drawn rectangle. It's a building, because you like buildings. Something in Catherine's expression broke open again, softer this time, like she was watching something impossible materialize in front of her. Thank you, Tyler. That's the best present anyone's ever given me. Really? The boy's skepticism was obvious. Better than expensive stuff. Much better. Because you made it for me. That makes it priceless. Tyler considered this, nodded like it made perfect sense, and went back to his drawing. Catherine stayed kneeling beside him, watching him work, and Marcus watched her watch his son, and felt something shift in his chest. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of trust. The beginning of something that might eventually look like family if they were all brave enough to choose it. Declan appeared with coffee for the adults and juice for Tyler. They sat around the conference table while Tyler drew, talking quietly about nothing important. Catherine asked about Tyler's school, his favorite subjects, what he wanted to be when he grew up. Tyler answered with the unself-conscious honesty of childhood, explaining his current ambition to be either an astronaut or a chef who made food for astronauts because someone had to feed people in space. Eventually, Marcus checked his phone and realized 3 hours had passed. "We should head home. Tyler needs lunch and his inhaler." Catherine's face fell before she could hide it. "Of course. Thank you for coming, for giving me a chance to explain. Why don't you come with us?" The words were out before Marcus fully thought them through, but once spoken, they felt right. "It's just sandwiches and whatever else I can scrape together, but you're welcome to join us for Christmas dinner if you want." Tyler bounced in his chair. "Yes. Please come, Miss Kate." Catherine looked between them, her expression cycling through surprise and hope, and something that looked like fear. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing if we're inviting you." Marcus stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Fair warning, the apartment is small and the furniture is old, and we'll probably watch a movie Tyler picks that involves talking animals. Still interested?" She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Her grip was firm, steady, and she did not let go immediately. "Very interested. But I need to stop somewhere first. Is that okay?" "What for?" "I'm not showing up empty-handed. It's Christmas." Catherine pulled out her phone, texted rapidly. "Give me 20 minutes. Declan will drive you to the apartment and I'll meet you there." Marcus wanted to argue, but Tyler was already gathering his drawings and Declan was shepherding them toward the elevator, and Catherine was looking at him with something like determination that suggested arguing would be futile. So he nodded, gave her his address, and let himself be led away, while Catherine pulled out her phone and started making calls. The drive back to Dorchester took 15 minutes. Tyler talked the entire time, telling Declan about school and Christmas and how Miss Kate liked his drawings. Declan listened with apparent interest, asking questions that suggested he actually cared about the answers rather than just making polite conversation. They climbed the 3 flights to the apartment, Tyler running ahead to unlock the door with the key Marcus had given him last year when the boy started staying home alone for an hour after school. The apartment looked smaller somehow after spending the morning in Catherine's office, the worn furniture and peeling paint more obvious. Marcus felt a flash of embarrassment before pushing it down. This was his home. He kept it clean. If Catherine could not handle reality, better to find out now. Tyler went straight to his room to arrange his new art supplies. Marcus made sandwiches, peanut butter, and jelly because that was what they had, and set out chips and the last of the Christmas cookies they had bought on clearance 3 days ago. He was opening a can of soup when there was a knock at the door. Catherine stood in the hallway holding 3 grocery bags that looked heavy. Behind her was a delivery person with 2 more bags and what looked like a pie box. She smiled, sheepish and uncertain. "I know you said simple, but I couldn't help myself. I promise I didn't go overboard, just picked up a few things." Marcus looked at the bags, at her face, at the obvious effort she had made to not be empty-handed. Something in his chest loosened another notch. "Come in. But next time, overboard is buying out the whole store. This is just thoughtful." They unloaded the bags on the kitchen counter. Catherine had bought a rotisserie chicken, fresh bread, vegetables for salad, ingredients for sides Marcus did not recognize, and a pecan pie from a bakery that probably charged $20 for dessert. It was more food than Marcus usually bought in 2 weeks, and he felt the familiar spike of pride and shame at accepting it. Catherine must have seen something in his face because she spoke quickly, her voice careful. "I'll eat most of it. I haven't had a real meal in days, so really you're doing me a favor by letting me impose on your kitchen." It was a lie, but a kind one, the type that let Marcus accept help without feeling like charity. He nodded, set to work making space in the refrigerator. Tyler emerged from his room and gasped when he saw the pie. "Is that pecan pie? That's my favorite." "Mine too." Catherine smiled at him. Good taste. They worked together to prepare the meal, an awkward dance in a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. Catherine proved surprisingly competent with a knife, chopping vegetables with efficiency that suggested she had done this before. Marcus made salad dressing from ingredients she had brought, following a recipe she pulled up on her phone, and Tyler set the small table with their mismatched plates and the good napkins Marcus saved for special occasions. They ate in the living room because the kitchen table only seated 2. Catherine sat on the floor with her plate, cross-legged like a kid, and ate rotisserie chicken with her fingers because that was how Marcus served it. Tyler sat beside her, chattering about the movie he wanted to watch. Something animated that Marcus had seen a dozen times but would watch again because his son loved it. The food was good, better than good. Catherine had somehow known to buy the kind of sides that stretched a meal, the kind that would leave leftovers Marcus could heat up tomorrow and the day after. She ate like she was actually hungry, not picking at her food the way Marcus imagined rich people did, and asked for seconds of the salad without any of the performative politeness he had expected. After dinner, they watched the movie, Tyler wedged between his father and Catherine on the old couch, explaining plot points they could clearly see and offering commentary on why the penguin was his favorite character. Catherine listened with the same attention she had given him in the restaurant, asking questions and laughing at the right parts, and Marcus watched her watch his son and felt something dangerous start to take root in his chest. Hope. The kind that could hurt if he was wrong about her. The kind that could change everything if he was right. Tyler fell asleep halfway through the movie, his head on Catherine's shoulder, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the last 2 days. She did not move, did not try to shift him off, just sat there letting him use her as a pillow while the credits rolled. Marcus turned off the television. His voice was soft so as not to wake Tyler. I should put him to bed. Can I help? They carried him together, Catherine supporting his head while Marcus lifted his body, moving through the narrow hallway to Tyler's small bedroom. They tucked him in without turning on the light, Marcus pulling the covers up to his son's chin while Catherine stood in the doorway watching. Tyler murmured something in his sleep about astronauts and Christmas, then settled. In the living room, Catherine started cleaning up the dinner plates. Marcus joined her, the 2 of them working in comfortable silence that felt more intimate than conversation. When the kitchen was clean and the leftovers put away, they stood awkwardly in the small space, neither quite ready for the evening to end. I should go. Let you get some rest. Catherine pulled out her phone to call a car, but Marcus caught her hand. Stay a little longer, please. We need to figure out what this is. She set the phone down. What do you want it to be? I don't know yet, but I know I want to find out. Marcus gestured toward the couch. Tyler drew you into his family picture. That's not nothing. They sat, careful to leave space between them, 2 people learning how to be close without the script of server and customer or rich person and poor person. Catherine picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. I've never done this before. Had friends who weren't business contacts or people I paid to be in my life. I don't know the rules. There aren't rules. You just show up and be honest and hope the other person does the same. Marcus leaned back, the exhaustion of the last 2 days catching up to him. You show up for the boring parts, not just the good ones. You call when you say you will. You mean it when you make plans. You let people see you when you're not perfect. That sounds terrifying. It is, but the alternative is eating alone at table 17 for the rest of your life. Catherine flinched. Fair point. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to be honest. You said you wanted real. Real is messy and complicated and sometimes boring. Real is watching kids' movies you've seen 100 times because it makes your kid happy. Real is scraping together enough money for a cupcake and pretending it's a feast. Real is letting someone see your apartment even when you're embarrassed about how small it is. I'm not embarrassed. This is a home. My penthouse is just a place I sleep between working. Catherine met his eyes. I'd trade everything I own to have what you and Tyler have. That's not performative. That's just true. Marcus studied her face, looking for deception and finding only raw honesty. Then stick around. Let us teach you how it works, but you have to promise you won't disappear when you remember how much easier your life was before you had people depending on you. I won't disappear. I'll probably mess up a lot because I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll show up. I promise. Catherine's voice was steady, certain. You want to know what I thought about all night? That drawing Tyler made, the one with 3 people in front of a house. I've never been included in anything like that. Never had anyone just assume I belonged. It felt like someone handed me something I'd been looking for my whole life and didn't know existed. He's a good judge of character. If he thinks you belong, you probably do. I want to believe that. Then believe it. Marcus shifted closer, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. But I need you to understand something. My son has been abandoned by every woman who was supposed to stay. His mother, his grandmother, teachers who moved away. If you're going to be in his life, you're in it. No halfway, no showing up when it's convenient and disappearing when it's not. Tyler can't handle that, and honestly, neither can I. Catherine turned to face him, her expression serious. I'm in. All the way. I'll make mistakes because I've never done this before, but I'm not leaving. You want a promise? Here it is. I, Catherine Winters, promise to show up. For Tyler, for you, for whatever this becomes. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The words settled in the space between them, weighty and binding. Marcus wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this woman who owned buildings and wore expensive clothes and lived in a penthouse could choose a life that included a broke single dad and his 7-year-old son. It seemed impossible. But then again, 24 hours ago, he would have said it was impossible for him to be sitting on his couch having this conversation. And yet here they were. Okay, we'll try, but we take it slow. Tyler gets attached fast, and if this doesn't work, he's the one who gets hurt. I understand. Slow is good. I can do slow. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they had agreed to settling around them. Outside the window, snow had started falling again, the flakes visible in the streetlight. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing Christmas music, the sound muffled but recognizable. Catherine's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then showed Marcus the screen. My car's here, I should go. He walked her to the door, suddenly unsure of the protocol for saying goodbye to someone who was maybe becoming a friend, or maybe becoming something more, or maybe just someone who would be in his life in whatever capacity they figured out together. Catherine solved the problem by pulling him into a hug, brief but genuine, her arms strong around his back. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for not giving up on me when you had every reason to. Thank you for showing up. Marcus stepped back, giving her space. And for the food. Tyler will be eating leftovers for days. Good. He's too skinny. You both are. Catherine smiled, the expression transforming her face from severe to almost beautiful. Can I see you both again? Maybe next week? Yeah, I'm off Tuesday if you want to come over. Tyler would love to show you more drawings. I'd like that. She hesitated at the door. Marcus? I know I keep saying this, but I really am sorry. For all of it. I know, me too. For what I said at the restaurant. You weren't wrong. I needed to hear it. She opened the door, cold air rushing in. Merry Christmas, Marcus. Merry Christmas, Kate. She left. Marcus closed the door and stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade down the stairs. The apartment was quiet except for Tyler's soft snoring from the bedroom and the radiator clanking to life. He looked at the leftovers in the refrigerator, at the spot on the couch where she had sat, and felt something he had not felt in 5 years. Possibility. He checked on his son one more time, adjusting the covers and moving a stuffed dinosaur that had fallen to the floor. Tyler stirred, muttered something about pecan pie, then settled back into sleep. Marcus stood in the doorway watching him breathe, this small person who was his entire world, and made a silent promise. If Catherine Winters was going to be in their lives, she would have to show up. Not just on good days, not just when it was convenient. She would have to learn that family was something you built one day at a time, one meal at a time. One moment of choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. But if she could do that, if she could prove her promise was real, then maybe, impossibly, his life could be bigger than survival and fear and doing it all alone. Outside, snow continued to fall on a city settling into the aftermath of Christmas. In apartments and houses across Boston, people drifted toward sleep, full of food and family and the contentment that came from traditions honored. In a third-floor walk-up in Dorchester, Marcus Reed lay in bed and thought about a woman who had sat on his floor eating rotisserie chicken like it was the best night of her life. In a car heading toward the financial district, Catherine Winters looked at a child's drawing folded in her pocket, 3 stick figures in front of a house with a chimney, and allowed herself to hope that maybe, finally, she had found what her grandmother's money could never buy: a place to belong, people who chose to keep her, a family built not from blood or obligation, but from the simple, terrifying act of showing up and meaning it when you promised to stay.